Hey everybody, I'm back. It's a new year. Happy New Year to you all. Gonna kick off the new year with another installment in my series on tactics used by narcissists and codependents to create and maintain abusive relationships. And today, we're gonna be talking about gaslighting. I'm excited for this one. We have a lot to talk about. This is a term that gets thrown around a lot, so let's not waste any time and jump right into it. We're going to start by talking about the 6 kinds of gaslighting that exists. So the first one we're going to talk about is countering. This is probably the most commonly known. So when people refer to gaslighting, I think that this is the one that most people mean, and this is the one that most people know about. So this is where your intelligence is going to come into question, your memory is going to come into question, right? You're going to remember a certain event or person or place or something, and the person who is doing the gaslighting is basically going to question your whole idea of reality, your perceptions, right? So maybe you were standing around and you had something like this in your hand. You had this drink, and some guy comes around and he smacks it right out of your hand, just like that. This guy, let's say Jack. So Jack smacks it out of your hand, and Jack turns around, and after deliberately smacking it out of your hand, he goes, "Oh, why'd you bump into me like that? You should really work on your balance." And you're looking like, "No, you just smacked it out of my hand." And then maybe you'll say something like, "Oh, you're just crazy," or "You just never pay attention. You weren't paying attention." And this can come from other people too. Someone else as a spectator could also gaslight the situation. They could look at that and change some of the details of it. Most of the time, because it benefits them in some way, right? Next, what we have is withholding. This one's a tricky one because I think a lot of people don't see withholding as a form of gaslighting, but it definitely is. So imagine you're dealing with a situation where things just don't add up. Maybe it involves more than a couple people, and no matter how many times you go over the situation, like, things don't make sense to you. That's because somebody might be withholding information that would change the whole way the situation is perceived in the first place. So this is a really tricky one. When it's happening, it's hard to know that it's happening, and the person doing it thinks they're doing nothing wrong, right? Because they're not lying about anything. They don't think they're gaslighting. They're just not saying certain things, because not saying whatever it is will benefit them. So this is something that I've dealt with in different, relationships in my life. And it's something to keep an eye out for, because if not, you'll start to feel crazy because things just don't add up. So when you're in a situation like that, be sure to think about the possibility of some information missing and who it would benefit to leave certain things out, right? The next form of this would be trivializing. When you trivialize something, basically, you'd say something like, "Oh, that's not that big of a deal. Other people have it so much worse than that, right? Than you." Or someone could say, "Oh, I had something similar happen to me, but when it happened to me, it was much more intense. It was a bigger problem," right? I think that trivializing is one of the ones that's most commonly done to yourself. People trivialize things to themselves all the time, especially if they grew up in an environment where every time they felt something or they had some kind of need, it was dismissed in this way, where their problems were just trivialized. It's just no big deal. So then these people grow up and they trivialize their own issues. So they're feeling sad or they have something that's genuinely bothering them, but they say, "Oh, it's not a big deal. I can't complain," But you can. I'm guilty of this one, saying, "Oh, I can't complain. I can't complain." But you can. And I don't think that we should turn ourselves into victims. But at the same time, if something is really bothering you, you got to express it. And be able to express it to people who actually care and aren't going to trivialize what is happening to you. Next, you have just straight up denial. Something happened. We can go back to the can reference you're drinking and can just deny that ever happened. I don't even know what you're talking about, right? I don't even know what can you're talking about. I never even saw you. And dismiss a whole situation. And someone who is in denial in this way, a lot of times can lead to triangulation, which is something I'm going to make an episode about also. They'll bring people in to their idea of what happened. So the more people agree, or they can get to agree with their denial, then it makes it more real for them. It makes it more true for them, even if it is untrue. So denial is a form of gaslighting. There's also diversion. So when diversion happens, you go to bring up something that really matters to you. It's weighing on you. It's something that, is important. But every time you bring it up, it seems that the subject gets changed. So this can happen in your family, in your romantic relationships, and in your friendships, where you express something, and no matter how many times you seem to try to dive into that subject, you can't seem to stay there. So this person is, in essence, gaslighting you, because diving into that topic for some reason or another isn't going to be servicing them. It's not helping them in some way, right? Or by avoiding talking about whatever it is that you want, some pressing issue that's helping them. Sometimes this can happen in romantic relationships where, like, maybe you really want to talk about the relationship and you just can't seem to get to that point in the conversation where you guys are talking about what problems are happening. It just keeps getting diverted. This is a form of gaslight. This is something that can make you wonder if you're going crazy, right? If there's something wrong with you, but then there's nothing wrong with you. You just keep getting diverted and you can't get your thoughts and feelings out. Lastly, we have stereotyping. So most of you guys know what a stereotype is, but there's also forms of stereotypes that are more personal, and they can be used. You guys ever met somebody who always jumps to always? So they'll say stuff like, but you always do this, and every time we go here, this always happens, right? I'm going to give you an example of how this could work. So we're at a party, and this one guy, we'll call him Jack. Jack comes up, and he steals a watch that's at the party. But Jack steals the watch, hides it, and then when I go to look for the watch, I can't seem to find it. I go, hey, my watch is missing, my watch is missing. Jack knows that Steve is at the party, and Steve, once upon a time, had stolen something from someone else. So very easily, Jack will say, oh, Steve must have stole the watch. He's a thief. Steve always steals things. Steve is always doing this. Every time something like this happens, it's Steve, so it must be Steve. And if he can convince more and more people at the party that it's Steve, then there you go. Gaslight successful. Stereotyping is another one of those ones that's sneaky, but nothing is always the same every single time, right? So it's good to keep an eye out for that and wait for proof in, giving people benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty, right? Lastly, we just went over the 6, but I think it's worth stating one more time that for me it's almost the 7th one, that not only can other people gaslight you, you can gaslight yourself, and that this happens a lot. So keep an eye out for where you gaslight yourself. Look out for where you see some people gaslighting other people or people trying to gaslight you. Keep yourself safe and protected. I think that bringing all of these concepts into mainstream culture is important because once these concepts are understood by the majority of people, it's going to make it more difficult for people to do things like gaslight, love bomb, triangulate, guilt trip, all of these tactics that exist. And then they're not going to be as prominent of an issue once they're known by the majority of people. So that's what we're working on here. So be sure, if this helped you out, if you enjoyed this, share this video, like this video. Stay safe, guys. Stay healthy. Stay blessed. Stay connected. I will see you next time. Peace.